Hi, it's Heather from Co-operatives First. This webinar, Leveraging Your Local Assets, How to Create Exceptional Tourism Experiences Using What You Have, was recorded on June 15th, 2022. I hope you enjoy.
Great, thanks. So now we're going to have our panel session with our two panelists, Clark and Christina, and Kyle can bring them up onto the Zoom stage. And I will quickly introduce everybody before we get going. So I want to say thanks so much for being on this panel and being part of this conversation on tourism. So quick introductions is I'm distracted because I'm looking at all of the things coming in the chat and I'm like, oh yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm gonna focus. Okay, I'll look later. Okay, so joining us from the southeast corner of Saskatchewan, Christina Birch is the Regional Economic Development Coordinator for Community Future Sunrise. So in addition, because that's not enough to have a job, full-time job, she runs a consulting business providing community and economic development training and services to regional organizations and municipalities. And from Norfolk Country, Ontario, I would just like to fill that in autocorrect. I'm not going to hold you for being Ontario against you, Clark. You know, it's an East-West thing. Okay, coming to us from Norfolk Country, Ontario, Clark Hoskin is Senior Manager at Deloitte. Since 1994, he's worked in destination marketing and economic development for rural, community, and regional level. He currently consults on tourism and economic development projects across Canada. And so Deloitte, I also understand that you've been recently from MDB Insight has been acquired by Deloitte. So if anybody's worked with MDB Insight in the past, that's Clark's organization. So very welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for being here today. And I can't wait to dive into this. The thing that I will also say is if you have questions for the panelists as we go along, we'll have a little bit of time after the panel for Q&A. So if anything occurs to you while we're talking, don't worry about holding on to it, just throw it in the chat and we will get to any questions or I'll summarize things that, we think that, yeah, thanks so much, share it in the chat. You can also ask questions in live time at the end, but if you want to just kind of get it off your chest and put it in the chat, then we will we'll get to the questions afterwards. If it's kind of like a direct thing, like we'll get the panelists to answer you directly, or I can send you an answer after. If it's just like, if they're like, what software did you use for whatever, like, we can just answer that directly. Okay, so the panel, we are going to start, sometimes I think we start with details and then we kind of get into it and then we share an example, but I'm actually diving in at the deep end here because I want to get in the framework of what does create a really great tourism experience. And so I wanted to ask both of our panelists if they could share an example of something that was a tourism experience or something that they did that was, touristy, that really stuck with them, really stuck out for some reason. And so we're going to start because it's all about leveraging your assets. I mean, we're talking about how to use those things. So I think starting with the example is the best place to do it. So start with an example of a tourism experience that really stuck out and has stayed with you. So Christina, did you want to go first on the question?
Sure. I just want to start off and just say thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk tourism with Co-operatives First and all the attendees. So thanks for that. So when Heather had first asked me about this, it was actually surprising to me what came to my mind because I've done quite a bit of traveling. But what came to my mind was something that was so simple. It was so easy. It was such an extra special touch, but it was just simple. So what comes to mind for me is we went down on a family trip to Great Wolf Lodge in Wisconsin Dells. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Great Wolf Lodge, it's a water park hotel with a primary target of families, young families, I would say. And after a long day at the water park, we were headed back to our hotel room and we had to walk through the lobby to get there. So there was a kids' dance party that was taking place in the lobby. And for my kids that were aged 6 and 3 at the time, you would think that this was the most amazing thing that they'd seen in their entire lives. So they ran up to me and they said, "Mom, can we stay? Can we stay?" And I said to them, "Of course we can." And they both wrapped their arms around me and said, "You're the best mom ever." And I looked at my husband and I just said, "I'm taking that compliment." And so we stayed and we danced and we had a party in the hotel lobby. It was easy for me as a parent. It was something completely unexpected, something unique. I mean, how many dance parties have you actually been to in a hotel lobby? And it was actually something that the hotel excelled at. They had wolf headbands and a coloring station for the children when we checked in. So it made that easy, or that process easy. They had rubber ducks that the kids could write their name down on, and they raced down the water slide. And I think what's important is that what stuck out in my mind wasn't the thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of water slide infrastructure. It was the music speakers, the dance party in the lobby, and the $2 rubber ducks. So I think it's important that most times an amazing tourist experience doesn't necessarily rely on something extravagant. Sometimes it can just be something simple and easy. And that is what's memorable in the end. So
Thanks,
that's
Christina. There's these people on YouTube, these kids who like went to Great Wolf Lodge and they like video like YouTubed it. And my kids like ask me like all the time about going to Great Wolf Lodge. They're like, how do you know about this? Like now it's like, I guess it's on our to-do list. Clark, go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Heather, and also thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. It's great to talk to people who are in tourism because you all have the coolest jobs, so that's always fun. The experience that comes to mind for me is simple as well, and it was on a food tour in a small city, and we stopped at what's called the Camerino Bakery and had a scone with lovely jam on it. And but while we were eating that and looking around the small little bakery, the owner told us her story, which was that she had worked in the IT sector, which had gone through a economic change, and that she was in charge of terminating people on a daily basis, and that she would go home and bake for herself to kind of lift her spirits. And that her friends and family told her, wow, your baking is so good, you should open a shop. And so she decided, I'm going to stop terminating people and I'm going to open a bakery and I'm going to make good baked goods. And so it was just about pastry as a lifter of spirits, you know, and I always think of that scone and that jam and that woman's story. And now I compare all other kind of bakeries and baked goods to that one situation. So again, the idea being very simple, you know, producing something or supplying a service that people can really absorb and savor, and maybe, you know, creating a story that connects yourself to that experience so that you can connect with the visitor. And so I think that really comes down to that experience for me. So as Christina said, you know, keep it simple for sure.
Sounds like a good principle. Actually, the next question I have is, what are the key elements of creating a good tourism experience? And so I feel like we already picked up on a few. We've talked about the story, we've talked about sort of that emotional connection that we have to the food or the place, you know, just that feeling of just like pure fun, or that sort of like emotional, that story of somebody who, you know, ditched the corporate job and went and, you know, sold the farm and went and made scones. And it's just a lovely story, and it has that kind of, it connects to us on a personal level. But just expand on this. I mean, what are the other parts of good tourism that make a good experience? Christine, you can go first again.
Sure. Yeah, so I think there's definitely lots of components to think about when creating tourism experience. You know, there's the attraction and accessibility and accommodation, all those things. But when we're talking about creating really great experiences, I think we need to think about what is your target market. So just like we started off the discussion with examples of our own tourism experiences, I would encourage you guys to do the same. Think about experiences that you had that stick out in your mind and jot them down. What was it about that experience that specifically stood out and made that so memorable for you, so great for you? Was it unique and it stood out that way? Was it the story they told, like Clark has mentioned there? Was it the smell that you smelt when you went into the tourism experience? Maybe it was the impeccable service that you had. Lots of times experiences stick out in our mind because of something we felt, much like Heather just mentioned. So for me, I felt joy when I saw how excited my kids were about the possibility of a potential dance party in the lobby. You know, I felt like it was easy, that Great Wolf had provided that for me. I felt love when my kids ran up to me, wrapped their arms around me. So there was a lot of feelings that I felt during those split seconds that made that so memorable for me. And I think what's important is that if we can put ourselves in the shoes of our target market and ask what they want, that's where the gold is, right? Wisconsin Dell does a great job of this. They're targeting markets, so they're targeting families, and they're checking all the right boxes. My kids aren't running around the hotel lobby while I'm trying to check in, right? They're adding those extra little touches of fun. So we need to look at things through the lens of our market and not necessarily our own. And sometimes that's a tricky thing to do. So I always recommend, if you're having a hard time doing that, ask your target market. Find a friend that is in that target market and sit down and have coffee with them. Talk about what you're planning or thinking about offering, or ask your customers directly. What brought you here? How has your experience been? Is there anything that we could do to add to your experience to make it better? And record what they're saying, see if there's trends, and take action steps to address that. And I do also think that we need to remember that great experiences consider all elements of the visitor journey. So that includes before they show up on your step, the researching of the experience. Is that tourism experience easy to find? Does it have a digital footprint where I can find out more about it? The booking stage, how easy is it to book? Can I book it at 11 o'clock at night when my kids are in bed and I'm not distracted? Or do I have to call during the day? I spoke with one of my friends who had said she'd heard amazing things about this accommodation and she wanted to go to it, but she wasn't able to book during non-work hours. So right off the bat, her memory of that experience is that it's hard. Even arrival, is it easy to find? Are there highway signs? How is the arrival process? And then we get to the actual experience part of it, right? Like, how does the individual feel while they're at the experience? Nostalgic, calm, and does that feeling actually meet what their expectation was going in? So I think it's important, today's digital world, be unique, find out what's unique about that. And we'll talk about that kind of asset identification in a bit, but be able to use that in your storytelling or your marketing. People are looking for connection. And by telling compelling stories that connect with people, you're just adding to their experience. So that would be my suggestions for turning a good tourism experience into a great one.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. Great answer. Clark, what's the key elements from your perspective of a tourism experience?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate something Christina said about the path to purchase, which I think is really important for a good tourism experience. And I'll summarize it with 3 words that I use often, which is the experience has to be viable, has to be reliable, and it has to be buyable. So if you don't have those 3 things, then you're already setting yourself up for challenges. So those are all good points that Christina made. I guess a key element for me for a tourism experience comes down to a couple of things. One being the whole authenticity piece. And I know that word gets used a lot, but really it's about your story. It's about your reality. It's about whether you're putting a front on or whether you're being yourself as a tourism experience. And a lot of people want to see that genuine truth on an experience. So I think that's a very important part of it, because people remember those unique, genuine experiences when they felt a connection. If there's nothing authentic about what you do, and I can think of an example of a bus tour company, then differentiate what you do. And the example that comes to mind for me is the wine wagon tours in the Finger Lakes, which is kind of a wine region of upstate New York. And it's about a guy who worked at a factory, had an old Volkswagen bus from the 60s and decided to turn it into a tour bus, which only takes about 6 people at a time. but he was able to carve out a niche within a market that has a lot of motor coaches, a lot of limos, a lot of 14 passenger vans, and he could carve out a niche within that. And obviously not everybody wants to ride around in a Volkswagen bus with no seatbelts, but he certainly has a huge audience and gets rave reviews. So I guess basically try to be different, or try to be authentic and true about your experience. But if you're not in that business, then just differentiate yourself.
I think that's something we've come to realize in the last couple of years anyways, that niche is everything. And if you haven't developed a niche, start thinking about that. Start thinking about your audience. I mean, and to some extent, like some businesses are not going to run on the niche aspect, like the big motor coaches, but I think that's not the audience that we're talking to today, and that's not us in general. So we can probably consider ourselves in this sort of like a niche interest, our towns, our communities, or whatever. So just double down on that and just own it. And I think that will be a good first step. Okay, and actually, first step, wow, I'm really just putting one thing in front of the other here. So as I talk about the next, so we talked about, so all of this can seem like a lot when you're like, okay, think of your perspective, and there's a lot of stuff to hold in your head. There's a lot of, to think about, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But what I wanted to focus on now is a little bit about what are some first steps that you would take into developing a tourism experience or tourism experiences. If people are thinking about, okay, we've got lots of different pieces, but we kind of need to like pull something together into an experience. What would be the first steps that you would take? I'm going to keep going in the same order if that's okay. Christina, you can answer that one first again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I work primarily with communities and destination businesses. So I always look at things through a couple of lenses. But generally, I suggest that, and this fits really good in with Heather's contest that she's has going on. So I suggest that communities and destination businesses really look at what they already have. So step one for me is, what are your assets? And that goes for both communities and businesses. So for communities, doing a little brainstorming session and writing things down. I can tell you will always be surprised about what you come up with if you spend a little bit of time brainstorming. So community attractions could be natural or man-made. So for natural, it could be landscape or skies, beaches, potentially wildlife. Man-made, there's lots, museums, historical buildings, hiking or biking paths. As we're kind of coming through COVID, the outdoor connection has been important to people over the last couple of years. So those hiking or biking paths have become really popular. Events or festivals, golf courses, businesses, that type of thing. So try and come up with a list, and also try and come up with assets that are available in different seasons. If you're working as an economic development officer, it's great to do this kind of asset mapping for different seasons, so that you know what your community has to offer throughout the year. And you can create packages to try and promote that. For businesses, for our destination businesses, what's unique about your businesses? So we work with businesses to try and identify what's unique and how they can use that in their storytelling, their promotion, their marketing. And it might be as simple as they're the only U-Pick, wildflower farm in Southeast Saskatchewan, and then they can kind of use that to further build on. And then step two would be, again, I've said, the target audience. Who are you trying to attract to your tourism destination? Families. So what are families needing from your experience? What are they looking for? An ease of experience, potentially scheduled activities, a little dance party when they show up, right? Or potentially it's people that are interested in health or wellness. So it's really important to be able to identify who your target market is, so that you can understand what their tourism experience needs are. And that's really important, because that allows you to provide an experience about what they want, rather than what you think that they might want. And then step three is to take all that information, take your list of assets and take your list of what your target audience is looking for, and spend some time talking to others and brainstorming how to make an exceptional experience from that information. And then I also always suggest, if you're having trouble, there is a lot of support out there for tourism development and supporting that type of thing. So reach out to your local tourism association or your regional or provincial one. I know here in Saskatchewan, Tourism Saskatchewan has been a wonderful resource for me, my communities, and our businesses as we kind of move that forward in Southeast Saskatchewan. So there are people that have already developed the resources to support you to develop the visitor economy in your community or further develop your tourism business. So that would kind of be the steps that I would take, for the development of a tourism experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. Clark.
Sure. I'll come at it from a couple perspectives and build on what Christina said too. The first one would be to think of it from the perspective of the tourism officer or active person in the community. I think that person has a huge role in developing relationships between the different businesses. Often, a good experience will come from a collaboration between a couple of businesses that can work together to create a new experience. So they share the burden and they share the outcome. But the other thing is often it's just talking to each other and getting motivated and getting ideas from other people. The more that you can get your tourism industry players talking to each other, the more intelligence they'll share about what the visitor wants and what's happening here and what's happening at that time. And so having that intelligence will really help build their business case for what they might want to try to do. So it's like you can't tell them as businesses, as an active officer, you can't say, well, you should do it this way, but you can at least get them together to communicate, to share, and to build upon it. And I think that comes from having celebrations, having workshops, having gatherings, whatever you can do to get them together and meet them, because they're often so busy they don't have the opportunity to connect, and so you can bridge that gap. I think from the perspective of the business, it should be focus on not only your strengths but your passion. So what is it about your business that you really, really love? Because if you try to build an experience or a new initiative on that passion, you're more apt to put more energy behind it and more creativity, as opposed to someone suggesting something that sounds like a good idea, but you're kind of humming, going, oh, I'm not sure, but okay, if they think it's a good idea, I'll do it. The main thing is to count to 10 and think, am I really into this? Am I really passionate about going in this direction? Because you have to be, otherwise, because you have to be in it for a long haul. You have to give it time to happen. And I think of, in my particular case, not only do I work for Deloitte, but my wife and I run a farm market, and she's in the process of trying to build a harvest dinner series on the porch of the farm market. Well, the first couple times you only got a few people out, so you could say, well, geez, it's not going very well. Maybe we should pull the plug. But no, the next one is fully booked up because the word of mouth spread. So it took time for that experience to gain some traction. So I'd say build on your passion and stick to it.
I think it's good to remember that just, the first time you offer something is not necessarily like, don't worry about it if it takes time to gain some speed. Because sometimes when we look at other people's success and it's like it came out of nowhere, but actually it took a lot of starts and practices and attempts before that success materialized in that way. So that's a good point to keep in mind there. So just keep continuing. I mean, if you've got something great to offer, just keep at it with little tweaks as you go too. Okay, so I wanted to approach this a little bit different angle because we approach the topic of tourism like we're all sort of fully bought into it, and I think we kind of are, like, tourism, it's great, but sometimes it can kind of feel like another thing. It can feel like an add-on, and to turn around and talk to others in our communities about the value of tourism and what value it could bring, possibly, it kind of gets set outside a little bit of economic development sometimes, or like sort of investment traction or whatever, it sort of has a little bit, it's out of its own little box sometimes. So I wanted to talk about how you have successfully, because you've both been talking about tourism to other people for a while now, how have you sort of successfully helped to sort of frame the conversation around tourism? And that's kind of a confusing way to ask that question. So And I guess the question is like, why should people be thinking about tourism? How should we be presenting tourism, presenting value to others? What value can it bring to our communities? Christina.
That's a really great question. And I agree with Clark that collaboration in a community, if you're trying to do that as a community development effort, is really key. And as it relates to community economic development, I mean, the more people that we can attract to your community, the better. By creating exceptional tourism experience, whether they're single day or multi-day or what they are, it provides communities the ability to showcase their community and increases the amount of external dollars that are being brought into the community. And I think that's especially important for business retention, just kind of as we move forward. I think that in terms of collaboration and bringing people together, most people want to see the communities and the businesses and the tourism operators within it succeed. They want their community to thrive. So if you can kind of just start a discussion with them about it, it really benefits everybody. I know we work with our destination businesses on collaboration, and there is so many opportunities for them when they do that kind of collective marketing. It opens new audiences to them, right? That aren't traditionally maybe their target market. So we do a lot of collaboration between communities at the regional level, and then also between destination businesses. And that's through kind of the creation of tours and all of that type of thing. But I think at the, bare bones, it's just kind of a sit down, honest conversation with councils or different economic development stakeholders. We have a network that we've created in Southeast Saskatchewan to kind of facilitate those discussions. And we open that up to everybody, councillors, tourism associations, economic development officers, business destination businesses, tourism operators, to kind of bring people together and provide a platform for kind of further discussion.
Yeah, I'll add on too in terms of the benefits of tourism. I think of it as important from the perspective that if your community is successful with tourism experiences and activities, then it's already presupposed for other types of investment. If your welcome mat is out, then it's not just welcoming visitors, but it's potential new residents and companies. I think the other thing to remember with tourism is that we often get caught up in the idea of kind of the foreigner and the person with the cameras around their neck, although we don't really see that much anymore. But when you really realize that over half, I think, of the average tourists in most communities are visiting friends and relatives. So they're actually somehow connected to locals. And so we they aren't strangers. They have an affiliation already. They're in your community for a reason. And so we need to be making sure that they feel welcome, because that can reflect back on our own businesses. So ultimately, I think that reminding people that tourism is an export industry. It's drawing in new money that wouldn't otherwise have existed in the community. New money that can be put towards things locally to build up other assets and make tourism and other sectors much better. So I think reminding people that tourism helps build that capacity to be welcoming, to be open-minded, to receive new investment. Those are all good things. And if your community isn't doing a good job with tourism, no one's going to want to move there or invest there. So you've got to get the basics in place, and that's being hospitable, and that's being a positive tourism destination.
Heather, I can't hear you myself. Is anybody else having trouble?
Yeah, I can't hear.
I was actually going to leave because I thought that it was on my end, but no, I can't hear her.
I'm using I think my headphones are dying. Okay, good. Okay. They were kind of making this crackling sound, which I think I can interpret as their swan song now. So the RIP headphones. Okay, so we had a question from Jenny about developing winter or shoulder season experiences. So do either of you have an example of somewhere that did winter? Actually, Saskatoon has kind of a few good winter things like winter eruption. There's been a few, like Kyle's nodding, he knows what that is. It's like kind of a festival in winter, if you Google that. But yeah, winter's tricky. Anybody have an example?
I can throw out an example of just leaning on what's still open in winter, because in many communities, the traditional tourism assets might be closed, and there's a reason for that. There just isn't enough traffic. However, often your restaurants are open, right? So coming up with some way to connect them, coming up with the Winterlicious type of concept of, you know, getting people to buy a passport and then having discounts to go to different restaurants, getting them out of their homes is one easy way of doing it. And if your town doesn't have enough restaurants, well, then partner with the town down the road or the one, you know, the third one over there. And so that's just one idea I've seen quite a bit of that happens kind of in the February, you know, March period.
So it's like kind of a pass, and you get like sort of checks for different eating at different restaurants.
Yeah, you get like you get, you know, 15% off, or you get a free dessert or whatever it is. Yeah, so it's just a little passport, and they stamp it, and
you could even put it like, you know, kind of a little bit of a competition thing on it. See like who gets the most points or whatever.
Oh yeah, and some of them do. If you hand in the passport and you've got all of the stamps on it, then you can be entered to win a big basket of something or other.
Yeah, it's easy. Christina.
Yeah, I think Clark's right on there. Just kind of identifying who's still open and kind of making those connections and providing that opportunity for them to create that kind of little tour or passport type of idea. I also think, you know, there's been a little bit of a change in outdoorsy activities over the last couple of years. I mean, everybody seems to have snowshoes and all of that type of thing. So sometimes the development of those trails with warm-up shacks, of course, because we live in Canada, but that's kind of an opportunity to further develop some kind of opportunities in shoulder season.
And Burl has her hand up here. Do you want to unmute and go ahead?
Hey there. So I have a question. We're a really small community development corporation, and our budget for marketing promotion is, I'm going to say, like high end $2,000 to $2,500 for the whole year. So we actually hired a social media person who just does that. She works 2 days a week and does a fabulous job. We are struggling and have struggled for the past year on whether or not print material is worth the cost, as well as advertising. So everyone's saying just do Facebook ads and that kind of stuff, but is there still a need? Because we are trying to do some regional brochures to have at least our local tourist booth, but we're like printing like 250 of them, and that doesn't go very far. So Tourism Manitoba, when they ask for your brochures, they want like 1,500. At this time, we are not making that amount. We're also working on a tourism guide that we would just sort of do local, but I'm just wondering if you guys have any advice on whether or not those print costs are worth it. We do advertising as well with Tourism Westman, and they're awesome, but the one ad to be in their booklet, which is like sort of a tourism guide like this, it runs about $1,000. So there goes half of our budget. And Tourism Manitoba is really good, but like it's so super expensive that I think we did one thing with them this year, and that was it. Like we just don't have the budget to be really involved with them to any extent. So just advice on where we should spend our dollars.
Go ahead, Christina.
That's tricky. Just as also as kind of paper copies are increasingly expensive right now. I can tell you we've just launched an Explore Southeast Sask initiative. And right now, all of our marketing is primarily digital. We aren't producing anything paper-based as of right now. Now we'll see where kind of that goes. But I have worked with quite a few smaller communities on tourism initiatives or even investment attraction initiatives. And I always suggest partnering with kind of local photographers or storytellers or individuals that are already showcasing your region to kind of promote what's in the region to do. So, and then using social media to kind of push that out. But yeah, on the paper-based, I know it's getting quite a bit more expensive right now to kind of produce that. Clark, do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's a real challenge for sure. And my experience within the industry, just in the last 10 years or so, actually, doing advertising and promotion for a community, we used print less and less. However, the one type of print material we used was a targeted, focused application. So what we did was we created like a little mini guide. It was like 6 pages and the size of like a Reader's Digest, and printed it and inserted it in newspaper subscribers of the Globe and Mail in Southern Ontario with a certain income, right? So we were very, very specific. We only had so many of them, so we needed to really focus in on it. And so what we found was that people would actually show up in the businesses in our community holding it and inquiring about stuff. And we were really good about making sure our businesses knew that we did it so that they would report to us. And so we ended up doing it for several years in a row, because what we found was it actually did drive new visitation, and people would say, I've never been here before, but I saw this cool little bakery in this brochure and I came. So I think if you are going to do it, it needs to be really targeted. It's almost like it's like a test, like you're testing a market. So don't go shotgun, like maybe pick one town and send a bunch of postcards to people in more higher income neighborhoods, or whatever target is your target, right? Fish where the fish are, and then then you can really focus your budget. That would be my suggestion.
I think what my board's kind of argument that we go back and forth is not even, it's more, so when your individual, when you go on your tourism experiences, do you find that, like I find that I always pick up brochures, and I find that more often than not, like I'm going to say 90%, they get garbaged. And so that's the concern is, they do not get kept, they get garbaged. And it's like, what about everyone who's in this webinar right now? Is there, like, can you give me some idea of how many of you actually pick up pamphlets and how many actually use them long term?
I think too, if you're going to do some paper, and I do like Clark's ideas, we've worked with destination businesses that have actually printed copies of their flyer, driven it an hour away, done a mail drop, and that was kind of their target, right? And if you can somehow link that back with a QR code to your digital assets, then that's for me. I like to scan, or table tents, those little pop-up tents that you can place at a gas station as they're driving through. People can just scan that while they're paying. That might be a useful resource as well.
Yeah, I think this is like a very tricky conversation that we could have a whole webinar on, like what kind of how to best advertise. I don't have any answers either. We got to advertise too. We got to advertise co-ops. So I think everybody's kind of wondering what the best way to go. But I think a couple of things I wanted to bring out from the chat is Verna said earned media, like press releases, very cheap. And a lot of the smaller town newspapers, they want to find out what's going on. So just help them along a little bit. Do a press release if you're holding an event or whatever. It's easy and quick. And then Leslie was saying, figure out who your target market is and who caters to that market already. And I think like the other thing that, what's going on right now is like influencers. I'm going to, we might not have time to get into our breakout sessions, but, people are influencers, people have a lot of followers on Instagram, like even real estate agents saying, great promoters because they have lots of followers. They're out and about. So see if you can say like, hey, why don't you come on down, take a picture here, send it to your followers, and put it in a post, and it's cheap and easy. Somebody, and then I think also Jenny mentioned the QR code. So yeah, targeting is key. So it's all about knowing that audience. And actually, the question I had for I'll just ask it anyways. We'll take it away, because we're gonna close up here. But the question I had for during my for the second session was about taking that asset that you mentioned first and thinking about your ideal visitor, or even thinking of yourself as a visitor. Imagine yourself as the visitor and like, who am I? Oh, I'm this age, I have kids, I want to go on a family vacation, I need something that has, that doesn't require a lot of work, I can book outside of whatever hours. I think we talked about that before. So I'd encourage everyone after to just give it a think, like, maybe go on one of those thought walks and just think like, okay, so the tourism thing that really stands out in my mind. And the reason for that is what target audience does it serve? And then what are other things that I or the target audience might also enjoy? So can I pull a few pieces together? Can I think, can I just add a piece in? So, because I really enjoyed that tourism experience, but my kids are hangry at this point. So we need chicken nuggets and we need them now. So, pull a few of them together. So Clark, I think you wanted to say something, so go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to build on something Bertil actually mentioned about having an influencer in their community, and I think that's an excellent initiative. I would suggest wherever possible, try supporting that influencer with as much local support as possible, by maybe coming up with a group of people who could be the kind of social media fans or ambassadors for a community. I know of a community where they created something early on with Twitter they called it Tweet Folk Tours, and it was in Norfolk. So that was why folk is in it. But someone would organize a kind of backstage tour of an attraction, and then there's like limited seating, and so people would have to tweet that they wanted to go. They would get on it, and then of course they would go to that attraction or that restaurant, and they would tweet about it while they were there. So it was all volunteer. No one was paid to do it. But it was a way to get attraction, activity, awareness of that business through social media. So lean on your locals whenever you can.
Excellent. Okay. Or maybe you are the influencer, so get out there and, post something. Who knows? Okay. Okay, I'm just getting suggestions coming through here. A meetup as a marketing channel if your offering is activity-based. Yeah, so you can use platforms that are already out there, like Meetup. Now you don't have to start from scratch. So Meetup already exists to have like people meet, go at a certain time or whatever. The assets thing that I was going to talk about is in where we have our cabin, this sailing club, which I think I talked about last year. But anyway, I just have to talk about it again. It's so great. But they have like a Tuesday, Thursday kayak night. It's just like a thing, like you show up, you kayak with other people. But if there's like, even to put that on a meetup, like show up at the boathouse and kayak or whatever, like a way to, have other people involved in it. It's software that it's already out there, that people are already on it. And people are looking for stuff to do. Okay, so I think, we are 2 minutes to the start of the hour. So if you're spending your lunch break with us, you're probably like itching to get back to your day. So I wanted to thank everyone so much for spending this hour with us today, talking about tourism, talk about leveraging your assets to create tourism experiences. I think it was a really great conversation. I'm so glad that Clark and Christina could join us for this and to share their expertise and experience with us. If you have follow-up questions, let me know. And I'll try to get you an answer. If you want to connect with anybody on here on LinkedIn, I'm just going to put it out there. We're all up for more connections. My network is your network, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have, if you want to connect, if you want to send an email, whatever, let's connect afterwards and keep this conversation going. I'm going to be hosting webinars in the fall as well. I have a bunch of topics that I thought of on my thought walks, and I kind of want to get your perspectives on them. So I might send out an email, and people can just vote for your favorites, or maybe suggest something that that I didn't even know. Honestly, I want like whatever people want to talk about is what I want to talk about. I don't really have an agenda. Yeah, Kyle said that on the website, cooperativessearch.com/webinars, there's all the recorded webinars. So like if this summer, if you're like, I really need a dose of something here, like a little bit of something different, go check out one of those recordings, and check out an email from me, vote for your favorites, or just throw me a wild card. Like nothing is too strange. I will entertain any and all ideas. So looking forward to hearing your ideas and joining everyone for a couple of webinars this fall, and having a great summer. And also post about your assets, because like I said, if you are in Western Canada, this is a pretty sweet deal. In Western Canada and you post on social media, share a story, post in the comments of one of our posts, Cooperatives First. Just search for us on your favorite social media platform. Then you can get entered to win one of 3 $500 gift cards for the co-op. So take that gift card. If you win it, fill your car up with gas and go see some local tourism assets. Okay, I told you. Yeah, that's what everyone has to do. Okay, so that contest is open for the next 3 weeks, until July 6th. So you have lots of time to enter, and use the hashtag show us your assets if you're not attaching it to any one of the cooperative search things. So I know that you're, so I know that you've entered. Okay. Thank you. Yes. Show us your assets. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much again for the speakers for joining. Thanks for everyone for joining this session. I hope that you learned something and got a little bit of inspiration out of this, and has given you some thought and something to think about tourism, and maybe just sort of like, you know, made you feel like, yeah, tourism, we can do this. We can, you know, I'll get back at this. I'm going to approach this from a little bit different way, or I'm just excited about doing it again. So thanks again, and we'll hope to see you another time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.